Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name's Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
And I'm LouiLou. My pronouns are he and him. I'm in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we strive to foster a brave space where we can engage in conversations centered around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please like, share, and rate this episode.
And subscribe. And
yes.
ding that bell.
Ding, ding, ding,
ding,
ding.
ding, ding. And I'm going to wait until the music is done. And now the disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions expressed.
That was the long.
You didn't know I was going to.
Go ahead.
The thoughts and opinions expressed on at the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we're just a couple of friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I cut you off, but it's like
it's fine.
I was going to say it's. I just heard
fine.
it's fine. It's not fine.
It's fine.
No,
you're rude. You're self-centered. You're selfish.
Okay, say something that's not true. No, I was saying it was the extended version of the opening. Because it doesn't seem like it's like like an hour later we're like,
I know.
Oh yeah, okay, great.
And then the show's over. Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. This has been a busy week. The pageant was just this past weekend.
Exactly. If you're wondering, it was the Castro Country Club pageant, and I'm not going to say it, but I was a former winner.
You weren't going to say it, but you just did. It was out of control. How many people were in that theater space?
Billy said they sold 275 tickets, so they oversold. It was pretty amazing.
275. I mean, there was just we were at standing room only at some point.
Exactly.
It was there was a lot of people there, and
energy was good. And
and what an amazing outcome.
The outcome was amazing. It was like I didn't even think about the possibility of a tie.
It felt divinely inspired, honestly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We had a tie, and these names might not mean anything to you, but if they do, Seone Gray and Ophelia Knight are our current reigning Miss Castro Country Club Ziz.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's so very, very exciting.
Absolutely. Doesn't it seem like it's been a really long time since last week?
Yeah, I mean, it was that intense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I went to see Company last night again. It's leaving soon, and I was like, take yourself out on a date. Took myself on a date, and then I finger banged me in the bathroom.
And you didn't wipe; you just walked around with a dirty finger the whole time.
I see people doing. I'm all hi.
Just giving people typhoid.
Typhoid. Okay, whatever. Great.
Typhoid
okay.
Mary.
I think we have someone with us.
We do have someone with us. Before you say anything, I wanted to introduce you, if that's okay. So we have David on today. David is a celebrated author and motivational speaker. He's known for his memoir, Every Grain of Sand. And his writing, he talks about personal journey of transformation and redemption. Talks about inspiring accounts of overcoming addiction, trauma, and adversity. And one of the things that I really love that I came across was one reviewer of his memoir described David as, are you ready? A true original, a unique talent who combines open-heartedness with erotic wisdom and a tender appreciation of the wounded, of the lonely, of all that's human and the most and least approachable in us. Isn't that beautiful?
I want you to introduce me now.
Yeah. So beyond his writing, David is dedicated to advocate for mental health and addiction recovery. And so we are so very happy to have you on today.
Absolutely. That's when you do the applause, Stephen.
That's when you do the applause. Asleep at the wheel.
No, we have to say that Stephen is amazing because he's not feeling out.
Yeah, he has a cold, showed up today with a cold, is wearing a mask, and is still here. So we really appreciate it. But we
love you.
But David, welcome on.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you on.
And that was a really great introduction. That is, I believe that came from Patrick Mulcahy. He's a celebrated writer. He's amazing, and I couldn't believe he wrote that for me. So I was just like,
it's so nice.
Great.
High praise.
Very sweet.
So how's your week? How are you doing?
My week has been really interesting and beautiful, really fun. I'm in the throes of changing careers right now, and it was really slow starting. And then all of a sudden yesterday, at the moment when I couldn't show up for my new work, they started calling. It was, I had to say no. And it was interesting, but it's, I have to just keep in mind that the universe has whatever it has in store for me. So
what inspired the shift?
Age.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things you didn't mention in my intro is that, and Louis knows this, I think a lot of people know this, is that I've been a sex worker almost my entire sobriety.
Oh, okay.
And yes, and even longer, but kind of early on in my sobriety, I kind of grew into my work as a sex worker. And so I just turned 55 in September, and I'm just wanting to do something different, and I want to do something that I'm passionate about. And so I decided to go into intervention and recovery coaching in essence, but actually partnering with other modalities of care. And so I've been doing a lot of certification and a lot of state board exams and studying and things like that to get qualified to do this new work.
That's really cool. Congratulations. Nice. So you said your birthday is in September. Are you a Virgo?
Yes.
Hey, so are we. And I can't. I hate that I just said that on air.
I know. We're all Virgos.
But we're all Virgos.
Exactly.
Stephen, are you a Virgo? What are you, Stephen?
Steven's a Taurus.
Oh, really? Oh. So my partner's a Taurus, and Virgo and Taurus are very compatible.
We gel well.
So
I've always. That's what I've appreciated about you when you signed on, and I was thinking
about Stephen.
Yeah, no, well, about David. It's like I'm on that, and why I was thinking, we should have him because, and all the time that I've known you, it's like, and you've been able to kind of maneuver and do that in a way, and be true to your recovery, and it's a slippery kind of like place to be, because I think I always think to myself, it's like, okay, so, and I joke with my sponsees about, okay, so. We've all been acting like adults. I mean, we're all adults, but we haven't been acting like it. And sometimes we're extremely defiant about the things that, don't work in our life, the things that maybe can cause us to kind of relapse or to fall short or whatever. And to be honest and to normalize, because I think that's a big part too, to normalize something that is just so natural and beautiful,
What?
Sex.
Oh, okay. I mean, that whole time I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
You know what? I think that you should drink some coffee before, and so you can pay attention.
I was like, "What are you talking about?" You could have been talking about sharks for all I know.
Wow. So, David,
but you were talking about like his.
This is what in the beginning I was the one. Like I was always poking and prodding, and if you go back and watch older episodes, but the student has surpassed the teacher, and now
interesting.
Well, the reality of it is like I told him I didn't create this. It was already there. I just encourage you to just be true to who you are.
We have company. Can we behave in front of the guest?
I'll try.
So David, this is really exciting to have you on. So you've actually, I think you've watched every episode this month, which has been centered around like sex and recovery and pride. And I've appreciated a lot of your contributions during those conversations. So I'm wondering if anything has stood out from you in some of our most recent conversations.
Good luck getting me to remember. I just remember last week there was a topic of discussion, and I don't remember what I had written, like this long, ridiculous comment.
That's great.
Posted it. I was like expecting you guys to just read it and answer to it, but and I don't remember what it was about. But no, I think here's my takeaway from the last couple of times that I've watched. Is it has cultivated so much curiosity for me, because I feel like you're the newer generation. You're the younger recovery generation who are coming up in this new world with digital media and more information, sex positivity, more tools are available to us nowadays, that we have evolved into this really great space. And to hear you guys, I don't remember who your guest was last week, but he was really great too.
Yeah.
We were talking about going into sex clubs, and it was just so like, I got a little bit emotional because for me, it's such a huge win. It's like, I just remember being early in sobriety and being so terrified, and there was so much stigma and there was so much shame, and prep wasn't really out, and there wasn't it was just, in my world, at least in my perception, there was a lot of judgment. And it was tough at first. As a matter of fact, it was so tough that I actually hid the fact that I was a sex worker for the first 16 months of my sobriety. Mm-hmm. I don't know who I was hiding it from, but I know that I didn't officially come out to my sponsor about it, and I was terrified. And then when I finally kicked the doors off of the closet about being a sex worker, I was really defensive about it. I was really and I was still learning. In my world, I was still very new in recovery. And that defense mechanism was a survival technique. But it just feels like we don't have to do that anymore. Just listening to your guys' last couple of podcasts, I was just so relieved, that we have this sort of cultivation of curiosity and courage to support one another and to show up for each other, especially around sex, because it's so weird and awkward sometimes. It can be Absolutely. So shame-ridden, so yeah.
Can you say more about, you were talking about not disclosing that you were a sex worker? So I imagine that before you got sober and now that you're sober, you've had to navigate shame. And so I'm wondering what has that looked like as a sober person in recovery?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I wish I could get you to repeat it.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is what I'm assuming here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you didn't disclose, and not that you even had to disclose that you were a sex worker, right? But it sounds like there was some shame around disclosing that you were a sex worker, right? And so I imagine that in the span of your life, you've had to navigate shame, right? So shame when you were drinking and using, and then shame as someone in recovery. And so I'm wondering, what has that trajectory looked like for you?
There's a slight separation there.
Okay.
The shame of avoiding trying to own being a sex worker is completely different than the guilt I felt for not disclosing to my sponsor and the people that I'm supposed to be accountable to that I was participating in sex work in recovery, especially in early recovery. I was just having this conversation the other day because I had said, I want to try it, right? I totally lied and said I had been doing it for a long time. I was such a liar when I first got I got into the rooms. I was such a dope fiend, and I was just I had to make money and I had to do my thing, and I wasn't letting anybody take my bag from me, right? My money, not my
we got it.
So, anyway, so yeah. But as I was trying to think a little bit deeper about this because it was at first I was very defensive, right? I was I'm going to do this work. It's helping other people. I'm being of service to the guys who couldn't, it was just all this other stuff. And once the walls started coming down and the defenses started coming down, the more sacred aspects of the work I was doing started showing up, especially in the people that I would see. And one of the very big turning points in my work as a sex worker was that I showed up for a man, and I didn't know that he was an amputee and that he was a war veteran, and he had PTSD, and he had all this shame and despair around it. And I was just in this room in the Tenderloin thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And I knew in my heart that he had experienced rejection deeply, and that he was prepared to be rejected again. And I was not going to let that happen. I was so codependent. I was not going to let, the clothes came off. I hopped into the situation and we did what we did. And I just remember walking out onto Gary Street. It was on Gary and Leavenworth or something, and sitting down on the curb. And I had don't judge me, I had a flip phone from Metro PCS, new in recovery.
We all did.
We all did. And I flipped my phone open and I called the guy I was dating at the time, and I just burst into tears. And the first things that came out of my mouth was, I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow.
I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing, because that interaction with this man who had expected rejection and learned that he was acceptable felt honored and felt seen and heard and touchable, was, for me, it was revolutionary. For me, it was incredible. I was just like, I was like, this is a beautiful experience. I want more of this. As any good addict, I want more. Right. So, so I just jumped in and I was just like, this is what it's about for me. It really is about showing up and crossing that threshold and finding a way to be useful in this room. And it was what I was learning at Fireside Chat, at the Castro Country Club. It was what I was learning. Go pick up chairs, go help out, go introduce yourself to.
You were practicing the principles in all your affairs, huh?
It was the same principles. It was showing up and serving, but in a way that was wild, and it just grew from there.
I think we have a comment.
I talk a lot, so shut me down.
No, it's okay. We have a couple comments coming in. First comment, Brandon writes, one of David's comments from last week, at first, when I would see other sober friends at sex venues, I would be a little apprehensive and weird, but got over it. Mostly love seeing other sober people nowadays, rarely interact with friends in anon-like situations. I know it's important to model sexual freedom, especially for others that feel super uncomfortable and awkward. One thing I remember is sex is awkward and uncomfortable at times, especially initially. Thank you for that, Brandon, and thank you, David, for that. And there was another comment, wasn't there? No, Stephen? Okay.
Well, I think on that, it's super important to note that, like, and I usually try to be thoughtful, because I realized that somebody was patient with me, so I get to be patient, because, I stopped going to the kink meeting on Fridays, and maybe I judged too quickly and too harshly, because it felt as though, when you have people who are like really kind of comfortable with their sexuality or whatever, and they forget that people are apprehensive, and like you said, and sex can be awkward, that they need to kind of like, meet the person where they are. But I think that it is important, especially for us, especially if crystal meth is something we've been doing, to at least attempt. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. David, I want to get your opinion on something. So one of the things that I've noticed a lot in the rooms, and so is Louis, is that a lot of people, when they're new, especially like in queer spaces, a lot of times when people are new, you'll find, and my partner works in a rehab and he's noticed this too, that when people come into recovery spaces, they immediately, not immediately, some people start identifying like people that they're sexually attracted to, and then they start to kind of like pursue those sexual relationships, right? And so I want to let's put that in the parking lot for a second. So on one end, like, of course, sexuality can be healthy and it can be generative, and it could also be used dissociatively, and it could also be used in a way that's like escapist, right? So I'm wondering, like, when you think about like the healing behind sexuality, I imagine that there's also like a sense of responsibility there. Anyway, I'm curious what you think about like sex and responsibility and recovery and like people who are new.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic. I think it's a really deeper conversation to have because I have a lot of opinions about it. I think context is also important.
Absolutely.
And the awareness of a sexual template is really important, and what triggers, what has historically caused relapse, what is this person, as an individual basis. There are some treatment centers right now in Los Angeles that are really leaps and bounds above and getting in front of this, what you're talking about. And I love it. But I think in general, my opinion is somewhat controversial, but at the same time, I believe it's a healthy alternative rather than hiding and shaming and being judgmental and saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, and don't have sex for a year or all that other stuff. In treatment and early sobriety, and we start attaching ourselves to people and fixing on the sex we want to have with the guy that we have this hot crush on for a minute. I don't know how medicinal that is. And I don't know how useful that is. I think we've all done something of that nature. We've all crossed into those murky waters. And I think I had this sponsor one time say to me, I hope you sponsor all the hottest guys in the room. I don't know what that
Oh, it's something, I think it was.
Did I do some kind of movement?
Yeah, you did some movement,
Okay.
and that's what came up. Yeah. If we do I don't know if we can do it. Only he can do that.
That was weird.
Yeah.
But he said, I hope you sponsor all the hottest guys in the room. And what he meant by that was to learn boundaries, to learn how to really be present with people who you're attracted to.
David, I love
saying that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just finish with this. Saying that, I have always encouraged my sponsees and the men I've worked with to engage in sexual activity in a healthy way. I've always encouraged it. And even with 7 days, if you go to the bathhouse, if you're going to hook up, if you're going to use that app, do it. Call me, call somebody, do it in a way that you feel comfortable doing.
Absolutely.
If you're triggered, talk about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work. It's not always healthy.
That's so important. I'm always with my sponsees now. I will never tell someone to not. I'm not. That's not my responsibility is not to tell you not to do it. Yeah. But I always say, it says on 69 that we don't want to be the arbiter of it, or 68, 69. Yeah. We don't be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct, but somebody better be, and hopefully it's you. Mm-hmm. And so that means checking your motives. What's going on? Why are you doing this? And be okay with that.
And let me just say this as well, because I think this is important. People would come to me for sponsorship or for advice and help because they knew I was a sex worker. They knew I was sex positive. They struggled with sex. They struggled with chemsex. And so the topic of conversation was often, how are we going to navigate this? Because I'm not giving it up. It's the one thing that's keeping me alive, basically. It's the only thing that, isn't a drug right now that I can use. And one of the, I don't know, I guess for years I have plenty of success and plenty of relapses behind it. So I'm not going to say it's the answer, but, it's been to explore. And I've said explore and practice, because sex without crystal meth, sex without drugs is not going to be intense.
Yeah.
Intimacy is actually going to show up. And because the brain has, I love David Fawcett says this in his book, that what meth does is it swaps out intimacy for intensity. Mm-hmm. And the brain starts thinking that intensity is intimacy. And so when we get into recovery and we don't have the meth and we go looking for that intimacy, the brain is looking for the intensity and it's not showing up. And we're like, oh, this doesn't work for me. And that may or may not be true, but that's why I say practice. And so it's really important for people to really, especially queer men who are, we are sexual beings. And so, but there is something to be said about, giving it a minute, give it a minute, take a second.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with my partner yesterday about how, he and you share a lot of the same opinions around this, at least the ones that I just heard you say. And he was saying we were talking about our own sex life, and we were talking about what does sexual fluidity look like, and what does a sex without fear look like, and what does sex without hangups look like, and what does sex look like when it doesn't have to feel so fraught with all the judgment and decisions. What does sex look like then?
I just love that you guys have these intellectual conversations about sex.
I absolutely want to talk about this, so don't you dare interrupt him. Yeah. Keep going.
So we were talking.
This is so important.
Yeah.
Please.
So we were talking about that. We were we're gay men. He and I, we're in a monogamous relationship, but we've talked about what would it look like if we if we started to reconceptualize the structure of a relationship. And it opened up this conversation about what would it look like, to face jealousy, or to all the things that are so wrapped up in sex and sexuality. Right. So you had some thoughts?
I do. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, do I have thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh God, you're going to regret you invited me to this podcast.
No, that's what we have you on.
Exactly. It's so beautiful. And it's so important because I want to repeat what I heard you say, because I think it's really, it's the thing that is my thing right now. It's my jam. And it's when we say, what does sex look like without the awkwardness or the insecurity? What does sex look like without the jealousy? What does our relationship look like if we are not monogamous? And so what I hear when I hear those that terminology, and I don't need to be rigid about it. We don't need to be rigid about the conversation. But when we frame things in that way, we're saying, I want to remove jealousy. I want to remove awkwardness. I want to remove insecurity. I want to remove my idea of not enoughness from the sex. And I am really, I'm here to give you some bad news and some really good news, is we don't have to remove it. We can have, I mean, at least in my opinion, my opinion, I'm so willing to be incorrect about this, is that insecurity, inadequacy, not enoughness, jealousy, our egos, our bruising, our wounds belong in the room with the sex. They belong to us. They are sacred. That's where all of the empowering information is. If everything was great and perfect all the time, the growth is not there to manifest that intensity and the intimacy of that intensity. And I'm not a doctor, but I've been doing this a really long time. And I know that, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of steps. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of trauma work, and the inadequacy, the thoughts of not enoughness, the idea that can I curse on this show?
Yeah. You can say whatever the fuck you want.
That my cock is not big enough, that I'm not good enough, that I'm too skinny or too fat or too whatever, is all there. It's all running game in my head. And my job in the rooms that I walk into is to right size all of that conversation and make the table bigger, make the room bigger, be more expansive, invite it all in. Because when our relationship to these ideas in our head are, I got to get rid of this in order for me to get to this place of freedom, it's nearly impossible. You may get reprieve, you may get a break from it, but it's going to come back, and then you're going to be like, I did all that work, and here I am again thinking my cock's not big enough, and I can't walk into the sex shop, or I can't ask my partner. Here's the big one for you, Anthony, that is going to come up, right? Like, we get into this groove with our partner, and then we don't want to ask for something because we are afraid of what our partner might respond to be. This is a very common thing that happens. So I'm just saying, like, when we seek freedom and liberation in our sexual spaces, especially intimate sexual spaces with a one-on-one, at the bathhouse, in dating, whatever it is our journey of trying to be rid of all of the things we don't like that keep us from crossing the threshold many, many times. I don't know how much of that made sense to you, but it is my
it made a ton of sense. Yeah. The thing is that I feel very fortunate in that my partner and I, one rule that we have is no taboos, right? So there are no taboos. That is like every question, every need is like valid. And I feel like very fortunate in that, I can ask for things that might be scary, And one of the things, and I feel like you guys, maybe you guys should connect sometime. One of the things that he says he says exactly what you say, which is like, all of that stuff is sometimes like, you can't get rid of the jealousy or all that other stuff. The one thing that we can focus on is re-engaging and reconnecting. And like, that is where we put like our attention and our strength.
Keeping all of that in also, while I was listening to you, it seems to be important for my practice of humility. Because
say more. What do you mean?
Well, because if I'm not thinking of those things, if I think that, obviously I'm never going to be perfect, but this idea that I got it, I may come in and not be concerned about the other person. I mean, because of some of my feelings of inadequacy or whatever, I may overcompensate or try to add or change or whatever, and it adds too. And I also think that this is a part of our process of growth. And the more that I experience this and the more that I realize, it's okay. Also, when you find out that the person that you're with, like last night I was with this guy, and we were able to have amazing conversations. Like, for me, it's like, I always share, I'm somewhere in between a relationship and, well, I don't even think I'm there, but I'm somewhere in between, like out behind a tree out back, and a person that I see regularly, and we had such an amazing time because it was I I didn't let go of any of that. I just kind of showed up, flaws and all, and to have another person kind of connect with you and you believe what's there on the surface. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I do. I do know what you're saying. David, were you going to say something?
I was just listening. I was enjoying the one thing I really love about this particular podcast is it is so evolved, and it is, there's, I just come from a different place where there's a lot of like opinions that are rigid and narrow-minded sometimes, and I just am so relieved that this is not one of those spaces.
What's interesting?
I need to get out more.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that for the longest time, and I feel like through my conversations with Louis and maybe living in San Francisco, like, I come from Pennsylvania, which is and Brian and I talked about this during the last episode, is that like, I come from a place that's like super rigid, right? Where like anything outside of like vanilla sex, even within a gay relationship, is like kind of like frowned upon, or people have like really intense opinions about it. So it wasn't until like I moved here and I saw things like modeled, you know what I mean? Like it was out here that I like was the first time I met people that were like, yeah, bitch, I slept with 15 people yesterday. And like, who gives a fuck? Like, it was the first time I came across people who were like really owning their sexuality. And it was also the first time that I came across people who were like, you know what, that's not my thing, but I'm not going to judge you because you're doing that thing. Right. You know what I mean? So like those two things coexisting. As people in recovery, I've shared about this before, is like I'm in SLA, so Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. So I wonder how you like, just given like your experiences, like how do you like conceptualize, or do you think about like sexual addiction when it comes to like sexual freedom and sex positivity?
Yeah. Because I'm not a sex addict, I don't want to speak to it in the frame that I think I know what I'm talking about, because I don't. And so my opinion doesn't have the value that somebody who has experience. I've done Sex Compulsive Anonymous before. I've dipped into a couple of the Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous meetings a few times. And I remember the thing about the circles. And I just love that concept about when we start getting outside. I love the tools. I love the tools. I'm just such a diehard street meth addict, IV drug user, homeless, toothless guy, that it's like, if I'm not selling my mom's jewelry and I'm not robbing a bank, is it addiction? And I know for other people it is. People have lost their jobs behind sex. People have stopped, living their life behind sex. So I know there's a modality or a space that experience happens. I don't have experience in it, and I don't want to have a judgment about it. It doesn't serve anyone for me to say something I think I know. But that for me, in the world I live in, that's how it is.
I feel I can connect with you on that, because I feel like I've had this interpersonal kind of conversation about that, because I understand how my behavior can almost look like addiction. But I realized that, and I came to terms with the fact that the obsession, the compulsiveness around it was related to my active addiction. And when there are times when I slip into and I'm using it to check out, but I'm able to kind of acknowledge it and step away from it. And I think that's a difference, because if I were in a situation, like I said, where I was consumed and I wasn't able to, but it's like knowing that I'm able to kind of stop, think about it, or even have the willingness, because sometimes you're like, I don't care. No, but I do care. And there are times when I have to fast. I have to have a sexual fast, because, I've been acting up, and I always go back to it.
Yeah.
I just have had so many experiences where I've had, week-long sexcapades. Like, I go to this thing in Fort Lauderdale. It's called Pig Week, actually.
Nice.
And it's like 9 days long of sex. I'm like, day 3, I'm like, I gotta go home. I'm like, it's like, no, it is too much. But I could see myself really fixated in that space. Like, really, if my body could hold out, I would probably just, ass up, whatever, or go to the ass up room, whatever it is, there's all kinds of play spaces I would enter into. It's fun, but it's not something I pursue. It's not something that I mean, I love, my world is involved with a lot of sex positive spaces, especially sober sex positive spaces, parties and things like that. So I do attend a lot of those things, but I don't know. Tell us, Anthony, what is your experience like with sex addiction?
Like sex and love addiction? I mean, I'm in a slaw. I think I think I'm with you in that. Like, I think it's, well, like, speaking from experience, I think that like, I'm an addict at my core, right? So whether it's sex or food or spending or like, you name it, right? Like, I can be addicted to just about anything. And the only way I know how to answer this for myself is like, I'm thinking about the behaviors that motivated me to go to slaw, right? And some of it wasn't just sex. Some of it was like in relationships. Like, I noticed myself like jumping from relationship to relationship because I would get a high from like the novelty of romantic relationships. And then like similarly, I noticed that like I would use sex to check out and that it was starting to like interfere with my life. And so, and, and I think the kind of the other part of that's related to all of that is actually, it was causing me a great deal of emotional pain. And it was at the point where like my behaviors were causing emotional pain where I wasn't so much, I got to a point where I'm like, you know what, like, never mind what the fuck I'm doing. I just don't want to feel this way anymore. And so I feel very fortunate in that, like, slaw exists and I was able to find like that peace of mind in slaw. And like, I feel like my sex and love life has been right-sized, but that's something that I try to kind of, that's like a space that I hold for myself. And like, one of the things that I have to be really careful of is I have to not like pathologize other people's sexual behavior, right? Like, the other night I found out that like this group of guys that I know, that they had an orgy. And my first thought was like, I wanted to pathologize it. I'm like, they have no business doing this thing. Like, I won't disclose much more than that.
You say too much, and I'll be like,
well, if I say too much, then like you can figure out who the people are.
I know the whores in our group. I love it.
But the point is that I have to be very careful not to put my shit onto other people. It's like,
I heard you say that last week too, and I liked that.
And it's like, and one of the things that I have to own is that like, I am still working through stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be 40 in September, and I'm like, I'm still working through like old ideas and behaviors and like, and so, that's kind of how I think about sex addiction, which is like,
that's what's so good about our relationship. And I think we are, what you were just saying, it's like we, on a lot of things, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but I'm absolutely respect and understand. It's like I'm all, and the fact that I feel like with the way that I think about sex and sexuality and all that good stuff, when I got to, and I know not everybody gets there, but when I got to a place where I'm going to talk about it, and this is how I sort through bullshit. Like, if you are someone who can't appreciate what I'm saying, or if I don't feel like I can talk, and don't get me wrong, I'm not the person, I'm not going to be talking about it all the time, but most of the time. But usually it's like, it's how I decide it, like who I'm going to spend my time around. It's like, because this is who I am. It's like, I'm going to give you me, all of me, and I'm going to express myself. That's the gift of recovery, that we have more options of people who are like, okay with you being open.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, we have a comment.
We do.
Rose writes, "Hey guys, just a note that these issues also arise in lesbian relationships and encounters. I've been lucky enough to have evolved sexually to feel very comfortable with discussing the issues with whomever I'm with, but it, like I said, is evident in a lesbian relationship." Just saying. Rose, I love that you're bringing this up.
Exactly.
And this is actually something we've been talking about a lot. So just some behind the scenes stuff is that we are exploring having a femme-bodied person to join in on these conversations, specifically lesbian, because
it's absolutely easy to forget about parts of the conversation, because like right now, all I'm thinking about is me as a black gay man.
Right.
I'm an alcoholic. I'm just focused in on me.
Yeah.
And, Rose should be a guest on the show.
Absolutely, Rose.
Yes. Come on home.
Sorry, I just got a text message and I'm like, bitch, I haven't talked to you. And speaking of, it's a guy I hooked up with when I was in the Dominican Republic, which was over 2 years ago. And he just sent me a selfie and I'm like, what? I haven't, like, what are you doing?
Your magic work. It's still working, huh?
Like, what? Anyway,
he just had a moment.
Because I was like, what are you doing? Okay.
Giggle.
But Rose, thank you for bringing that up.
I know, Rose.
That like, you're 100. That's 100% true.
You make us do better.
Yeah, 100% true. But yeah, and so having your comment contribute to the conversation in a really meaningful way. So we have, I think, 9 minutes left or 5 minutes left. And so I don't want to. 4 minutes left. Okay.
4 minutes left.
4 minutes.
Just
oh,
give us
wow.
4 minutes.
We're going to do our little thing, and then we're going to go to our podcast.
Yeah. So we're going to, we'll close out the on-air stuff. And then for folks who are interested in the rest of this conversation, you can tune into.
We love you too, Rose.
We love you too, Rose. Thank you for tuning in. For folks who are interested in hearing the rest of this conversation, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts and our podcast exclusive content.
Yeah, when Brandon starts uploading these episodes.
Oh, not you calling people out on air. My God. All right, Stephen, where are those notes?
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
Tune in every Wednesday at 8 p.m.-ish Pacific Standard Time when we go live in our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts. All right.
There we go.
And we're still recording.
The stream has ended.
The stream has ended.
I was looking at my shirt. I picked this shirt because I was thinking, well, maybe it's as wild as this background.
Yeah, and I couldn't read. The only thing I could read was Finding Fellowship.
Yeah, it's like
2022.
A new way of living, or
a new way to live.
A new way to live.
A new way of life.
Yeah, this is.
I thought it was a new way of life.
No. A new way to live.
What do I know? I didn't go.
No, it was all good. Just like, come on, love that it's still going on. So how was that for you?
Who, me?
Uh-huh.
Oh, it was great. I was so tempted to start plugging my new book, but I'm not trying. I'm trying not to talk about it that much because I don't know why. I'm just weird because I'm in the last edit right now and it's a home stretch and I'm really sensitive about it, but I'm super proud of it. Like, I think it's going to be really useful in the world, in the world of the people who need to read it or who want to read it.
Right on.
It's going to be great. Yeah. You're going to love it.
I love that. Yeah, you could have plugged it. I actually have it in my notes to bring it up, and then we just never got to it.
It's cool.
Because there's so much, it was juicy. There was so much, like you were saying. It's like,
well, you know what? We could talk about it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a title for your second book?
Yes.
What is it?
It's called The Four Rooms, an inquiry on sexual freedom and well-being. An inquiry is a play on words with the word queer in the middle of it.
Nice.
Yes. It's mostly focused for queer men. However, everyone is welcome to the journey. As we have seen Rose stepping in, inclusivity was super important when I was writing this book. It addresses ableism, but it's so crazy. And I talked a lot about it during the show without directly talking about it, but I talk about trying to remove the imprints of our insecurities and wanting to change who we are and become this better version of ourselves. And I'm calling it all to the table in this book. And I'm really giving tools and ideas and cultivating curiosity. And it's, I call it the anti-self-help book because it's not a self-help book. It proclaims to do nothing except cultivate some questions for you to ask yourself. And there's some exercises and stuff. And it's really,
it's like,
I'm so happy about it.
It's like,
crazy.
It's the way I feel about the Four Agreements. Cause I always think about the Four Agreements as the Four Agreements is just, it's not like it's not telling you to change anything. It's just kind of in addition
Right.
to what you're doing.
Yeah. And the 4 rooms is actually from an old Hindu religious thing where they say it's predicated on the 4 rooms of emotion, mental, spiritual, and physical. And I change all of that up, and because I don't use spiritual or any sort of religious type dogma in the book. I use sacred, which is more meaningful, things that are meaningful and sacred to you, and
absolutely
practices and ideas, and so it's if you visit, they say if you neglect any of the rooms in your house without at least going in to open a window and let the air in, then you are not practicing your whole well-being. And so that's kind of the precept of the book is what it's written on. But I actually just use it as a really convenient template to address all the whole issues of our lives around our physical body, our mental, especially the room of the thinking mind, the emotional, our heart, and the sacred, and the room of meaningfulness. What do we truly care about? What are we moving towards? What are our values around our sexuality? Things like that. So I'm so on fire about it right now because I just finished this massive edit, and it's like I feel like it's the book I wanted to write before Every Grain of Sand. Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to write Every Grain of Sand, but I was so over it by the time I got to write it. And my copy editor and my co-author, she talked me out of it. She was like, "No, you need to write your memoir." And I was like, I tell my story every day to people all the time. But this is the work I really want to do because it's going to be useful for the men and people who are struggling with their sexuality, people who haven't been touched in years, people who can't even imagine falling in love with themselves or anybody else. It's these are really powerful, empowering tools that we can use to really engage life and flourish, not just become happy, but really flourish in all of the elements, especially our shadowy, scarier parts, which is the stuff we're always struggling to address, right? We're always struggling to face or sit with or be with because we oftentimes judge it as bad. Yeah. Like, oh, this thing is bad. And it's bad, so I got to get rid of it, or I got to not acknowledge it. It's got to be invisible, or I've got to do something to shift my thinking. And this is truly about inviting it all in and sitting with the idea that the sacredness and the beauty of that shadow, of those dark elements of our lives, our insecurities and the things that we think and feel are actually really important. They're very, very valuable. They're the sweet spot of our existence. And once we shift that relationship to those ideas, freedom no longer becomes a process or a journey. It just is, it's liberating. And it's just really, I'm so happy about this book. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it arrived, but whatever it is, I'm just so happy because it's done basically. And it's no longer mine to, it's no longer mine to control. It's like, it's the gift it's like, this is it. Now I get to let it go and let it do its job.
You're like in tune with your higher self, huh?
I am so plugged in. Yeah. It's so crazy.
What you're saying reminds me a lot of, it's like a Vedantan idea that we are changed not by what we turn away from, but what we turn to. Like when we're thinking about like the dark spots or like the parts of us that feel ugly or unlovable, I feel, like I agree with you. I think those are like, they're very rich. Like that's where like richness is. Like that's where like life can really blossom. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Do you have any thoughts, Louis?
Well, no. I was going to ask you because I hear a lot of folks talking about The Ethical Slut. I've never read it. Mm-hmm. Is that
Jan Hardy? Yes.
Is that something that helped you in the beginning? I mean, because
no. I got to tell you, I've never read it.
Yeah, well, because in my mind, I was thinking about like where I sit in my relationship to. I feel like obviously doing the steps, coming up with the sexual idea, like doing the other work that I didn't think was even connected to my sexuality. Yes. The other work, but doing that work, I'm in a good place and. For the individuals who aren't there, and sometimes these roadblocks are so high, or they seem so insurmountable. What are some of the tools to help somebody get started?
Yeah. And that's a really, really powerful place to be because, and I love what you said. The really important part is everybody thinks it's about getting to the sex, getting naked and being like in front of the mirror. So my body, and I can be okay with where I'm at in the world. And a lot of people think that that's the goal or that's the path. Right. And I have to say that it starts with, and it's kind of a recovery based element. It really starts with, acknowledging where we got our ideas about the things that we think, becoming a witness, really becoming the observer of what we're thinking, right? Instead of becoming what we're thinking. Like, I believe I have this judgment about myself. I am this thing. I am this element. Let's just use obesity as one example, right? I'm fat. Nobody wants to fuck a fat person, blah, blah, blah. So those words and those messages are culturally driven into our media, into our families, our religion, everywhere. We hear it everywhere. It happens everywhere. And then we have subcultures of bear community and things like where there are pockets of acceptance, but there is a generalized stigmatizing of a particular thing that we have a belief built around. And one of the tools that happen is when we trace the roots of those ideas and those thoughts, and we discover where they come from, then we determine not if they're true or not, because it doesn't matter if they're true. It doesn't truly matter. A lot of people think, oh, let's challenge the truth and let's try to change the truth so that we can convince you that that's not true. And I don't believe that's useful. What I believe is useful is to see where it is and see it for what it is. Is it a strategy? Are we using it to protect ourselves? Is it some kind of bullshit that we tell ourselves just to keep, the protection going? Or is it a belief system, and these belief systems are ingrained in us. And so they don't change. And there's lots of other things, but I think personally is when we start doing the nuanced, smaller bits of work, getting to, and it doesn't take that long. When we start having these discoveries, they become, you probably have experienced this yourself where you think something is this big thing, right? You think it's something is a big thing. And then there's this one key turning point that changes everything for you. And you're like, oh, I was so hard on myself about that thing for so long. And now look, it doesn't even really, it still sits at the table, but it's not the head of the table and it's not the turkey in the middle, right? It's not everything. Right. So there's small little pieces that we get. And a lot of this stuff is like engagement, right? Creating connection, being in community, actually being in community, not on the outside of community, but actually figuring it out and being a part of community. And there's a whole bunch of tools that I present in the book that are sort of like, if I would never do it, but if I was going to do it, it would be like 4 weeks to sexual freedom and well-being. It's not, it's very short and it's very easy. These are simple ideas. They're not hard to implement. One of the tools of becoming an observer is, yes, I can observe myself having this thought. I can understand what the thought is, but then what? Right. And so my tool is to start asking empowering questions, start saying, what would it be like to, a lot of guys that I work with have issues with chemsex. They're like, I can't have sex without being high. I just can't.
Right.
I don't know what it's like. I'm going to try. Right. And the empowering question about that is cultivating curiosity, to start asking yourself, what would it be like if I was able to have sex without being high? What does that feel like? And then start taking small risks. You don't have to jump right into the bathhouse or, get on sniffies and have a sober gangbang. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Which I love the idea, but it's just like,
yeah,
it's too much work. But yeah, so there's lots of little tools coming out, and I've actually been posting a lot of like questions on my social media lately because I'm actually trying to cultivate curiosity around all these ideas that are in this book, because I don't know. I think it's really important that we as queer people begin to not just declare sexual freedom and say, oh, we could be big sluts if we want to, and declare it, because there are people, predominantly men that I work with, people that show up in my space looking for solutions to their insecurity or to feel touched, to feel accepted and loved and seen. They don't have you could declare sexual freedom all you want, but if you're not giving them the tools and you're not showing them ways to have that, not just by modeling, but giving some ideas so that they can navigate along with you. Because in my book, in the work I do in the world, I never say I'm leading something or I'm teaching something or I'm here's the way, let's do it. I'm joining you on this journey. We're going together, and what you're experiencing and what I'm experiencing, we get to share together. It is not, there's nothing, profoundly groundbreaking about that, but it's, when you join somebody on their journey, you're not leading them or showing anybody anything. You're allowing them to uncover those ideas within themselves on what that looks like for them. And so it never becomes my responsibility, but also never comes from me. It comes from them. It comes from the people who are and a lot of people, especially in recovery, who have tools, who have outlets, who have sober queer friends who are modeling great sexual health and wellness to them, will be very Captain Obvious about when they read my book, like, oh, I already know this, this isn't as useful for me as it is for somebody who feels absolutely broken inside and afraid and unlovable and untouchable.
That's a lovely reminder if they are aware, because look, what you were talking about is like, this is exactly like I started in recent years, like the last 5 or so years in sponsorship. That's exactly the approach that I've not just paying lip service, like you're the one who keeps you, but really saying, you know what, this is your journey. You know what? And I'm not going to make your humanity about me. I'm not going to put you on my timeline anymore, because I used to put sponsees on my timeline. We got to get here. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got that. And the reality of it is, it's like, I let things unfold. Like sponsee showed up yesterday. We started to do the work, and I heard in his voice the passion. We just started working together, and I realized I need to let this experience right now be what it's supposed to be. And it was wonderful, because by the end of the conversation, something in me, I realized something that I had been doing that was causing me some discomfort. I needed to address it. And so I felt like I got a little sponsored in that relationship.
I love that.
Yeah. And that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Steven's giving us a look, so we have to wrap up.
Hi, Steven. Are we wrapping up?
Yeah, we have to wrap up.
I talk a lot. I warned you.
No, David,
this was amazing.
This was fantastic. I'm so glad. Well, when you took your mask off, he took his mask off and said, "Shut up."
Yeah. He coughed. He took his mask off and coughed at you.
He starts playing the outro. Anyway, David, thank you so much for joining us.
I love you.
Yeah, good luck on the second book.
Yes, I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
We'll
talk soon. Bye.